welcome again. Now, you have to put up with me in a kind of a one-way. I really enjoyed the other Monday evening with you on Adobe, but as I've gotten to see a little bit about your backgrounds, overusing Adobe is a bad thing. So we'll continue to use these. You were pretty happy with them. I'm going to try and do some synthesis work here without going over my 10-minute limit. So where I want to start, he gives you Bowman and Deal, and he says you should know it and read it and be familiar with the framing, and I agree. But then we don't do a whole lot with it, so I'm going to try to link Nordhaus and Bowman and Deal and some things you have to do, and I'll try to chuck through that pretty well. So my first assessment, I've been digging through that syllabus. We're going to redo that syllabus. It's a mishmash. It's not as easy to follow as I would like. But you should by now have been through at least the first two of the Bowman and Deal frame units. The first being, of course, structural, and the second, human relations. And it's very good that you got those right now with what you're being asked to do, because I want you to use those as a way to, if you will, critique Nordhaus. Okay, you're looking in Nordhaus at those first 5 chapters. The first one is intro, and then there are 4: skills, traits, style, and situational. Those are fine. We're going to determine how these all work, because in my opinion, after having worked with this for a good long time, certain of the frames you're going to discover work better, or certain of these 6 that he has, 4 you have now, 2 more to go, work better with one frame than with another. So the first thing that I'm going to ask you to do, and you've already done, I got Albertson already, and it was great. By the time you see this, I'll have more of your assessments of the LTQ. Sent you an email earlier today saying, look, Pearl was concerned that they were with single space and she used to double. I'm perfectly happy with double because my eyesight isn't what I would like it to be. So if you want to double and you need an extra half a page to page to get in what you want to say, believe me, I don't count words, don't count pages. Never been anything I've done. So if you want to do that, but not only should you analyze the feedback you got on the LTQ provided by your colleagues, but I also want you to do a content analysis of that instrument, the skills that it sets up, and look at the scores that you got. I was very impressed with the one I've seen. Well, as an example, take a look at those questions, those 15 questions. And if you look at questions 5, 11, and 12, you're going to discover that they tend to work very well with the structural frame that Bowman and Deal have set up. I'm not saying the others can't be found in there, but those 3 skill areas are, I think, best used with that first frame. I'm going to go through a couple of things I think you ought to look at. Some people I want you to know as you come up down that didn't make any sense, as you progress down the road toward comps. On page 79, you're introduced to one of the finest thinkers we have today, and he's still active, still on the board of the Harvard Business Review. He's at MIT. His name is Henry Mintzberg. So be comfortable with what Mintzberg tells you, because you're going to be taking a number of courses: budgeting, planning and decision-making, and some other leadership courses like the presidency. And you will find that what Mintzberg has to say will be very, very helpful. The other thing that comes in around page 89 in Bowman and Deal is the idea of restructuring. Please take a look at the LTQ and see if you couldn't use that and the responses that you got to build a strategy for dealing with the stuff on page 89 that shows you how one could go about restructuring. Pretty much what I have to say about the structural frame. It's the oldest and somewhat shop-worn, if I may say it that way. Human relations frame, very much where most of us are in the 21st century. Human relations, situational, and we'll get into it a little bit later with one of the others, seem to be where things are going. So here again, I'm going to ask that you pay attention to a particularly important individual. I believe it's page 112. I can't read my notes very well. Mary Parker Follett. Now, she's been around a long, long time. She was one of the best early writers in the field of leadership. She took on the railroads when they were the king of economic and leadership structure in this country and really pointed out what was going to happen. And she was absolutely accurate. I love to call her, call her the godmother of the human relations frame. Elton Mayo, well, Elton Mayo's an interesting guy. I don't look at Elton Mayo so much as human relations. What I learned from Elton Mayo was that if you're not careful with the research frame that you use, you find yourself in a world of hurt. And when he did the Hawthorne studies, he was, for a time, in a world of hurt because he couldn't explain to General Electric why certain things happen. So we saw something on experimenter bias. We also saw group identity development. We saw a lot of very exciting things come out of Mayo, but he's not that much, as I see, a leader in the HR. There are a couple folks who are, and you're going to get them right now. And they were both followers of Mary Parker Follett. The first was Maslow, Abraham Maslow. And you're all very familiar with Maslow. We'll talk more about Maslow as we look at that hierarchy situation, particularly 3 and 4 of his. I think it's a 7-step. It's 3 and 4 or 4 and 5, probably 4 and 5. Okay. But let's talk about the LTQ again for a minute. As I read it, questions 1, 7, 8, 9, 13, and 14 link very closely to the HR, which means they're carefully explicated by Follett, by Maslow, and also by Doug McGregor. Now, McGregor, with his theory X, theory Y, was good, but we stopped at that point, and I don't think Nordhaus does what he could have done. For example, with William Ouchi, after this moved to Japan, Ouchi looked at theory Z, which was an integration of the two of them. And so these guys will have a great deal of importance for you later. One of the things that comes out in the human relation, look at page 142, for example. Empowerment is a leitmotif that runs through the entire human relations material. Now, if you're not familiar with music jargon, talk to our good friend. I hope she showed you some of her material on the music, because it looks to me like I'd love to hear that woman sing someday. But she understands leitmotif, I know. We get a little bit into it. I'm going to take a pot shot at it. We get a little bit involved with total quality management. Now, total quality management set the world on fire for about 5 years. Then all of a sudden, what we began to discover with that was that it was a little bit too much top-down direction. It was too much do what I say, not what I do. So there's been a transition. And Nordhaus doesn't talk much about CQI, continuous quality improvement. Bill Ouchi brought that back. The Japanese have a model that talks about every day you try to fine-tune and fine-tune and fine-tune. And then as you start to move toward new technology, new insights, you make quantum leap. But even after that quantum leap, fine-tune, fine-tune, fine-tune. It's very good. You have the skills inventory on page 64 in Nordhaus. As I said to you in our Adobe connection, take those. Please take a look at his and then link it to your gap analysis. Something else I want you to look at, some names that I know you will see again, are Chris Argyris and Schoen. Schoen more than Argyris. Argyris is pretty much retired. But Schoen continues to do some work in the planning field and how you plan collaboratively. And I know when I teach planning and development, I can guarantee you'll see more of him. Another one that I'm very favorably oriented toward, and for that matter, so is GK, because she comes from Texas, and the Blake Mouton grid came from Texas. Take the thing and look again, do this comparative analysis of where you fell on the Blake Mouton grid and where you ended up on the LTQ. Okay, the other one, we worked with these people. I was fortunate. When Hershey got started, he hooked in with a guy named, or when Blanchard got started, he hooked in with a guy named Hersing. And these two guys in the late 60s were looking for anybody to get involved to validate their material. I was doing some work at that time with Case Western Reserve as part of a Title III grant. It was one of our host schools. So I got a chance to take their instrument, be trained in how to interpret it, at no cost, because they wanted feedback. So look at that, at their matrix. And then you answer 4 questions, which kind of talks about how that flows, that kind of bell-shaped curve that they use. And then take a look again and see, when you look at your gap analysis, does this really help? It's a very useful way to do this, to constantly play off Nordhaus against the other stuff we ask you to do. This way you get much more focused on what it means to be the leader that you are training to become. Thanks again. Keep feeding me material because I enjoy every minute of it. Thank you.